You're listening to ABA On Call, hosted by myself, Rick Kubina and Doug Kostewicz. This is your front row seat to the future of behavior analysis. Join us for fresh ideas, practical strategies, and bold conversations designed to inspire action. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ABA On Call. Doug, you're looking fine over there today.
Thank you very much. I'm just sporting a new shirt, so I love it.
Yeah, I like that. Pitt has some really cool colors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm jealous. Today, we're going to talk about misunderstandings and misapplications of concepts of ABA. I'm sure everyone in our audience has had this happen to them at some point, and it's just going to keep happening because we have a science. And for us, we are applied scientists, and we're taking this behavior analysis, this actual science, and we're applying it to people, to in whichever capacity that we work. And folks who are around behavior analysis may have heard things or maybe even worked with you, and they think they understand something. And this is true too for the students that we work with and people who are new. And every now and then, you even get this with people who are more seasoned, and it just can happen. So let's talk about some stories that we have had. You and I have both supervised students in many different capacities, either through the university, through in the past just doing BCBA supervision, and maybe tell some stories about times when a student has either misunderstood or misapplied a concept of ABA. So,
and before I tell a story, I wanted to just reiterate something you said. So it is a case about understanding the technical aspect. So you said we're science. It's important to be technically correct. And we're going to have some fun with this, but understanding the technical aspect and then being able to talk about it in lay terms is a whole nother step. So we're really focused on making sure that when you're interacting with someone that you're technically correct. And there's a little bit of nuance can be a problem. And I'm going to share this with my first example, and I'm sure you've had this as well. I'll have students and they're really new into ABA, and they come and they hear words in society, words like reinforcement, right? And so they're just getting the feel. I've maybe introduced a concept to them. They come in and said, you know what, I've been trying that reinforcement thing with kids, and the kid is just not doing it.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, reinforcement. What is reinforcement then? And they said, oh yeah, I give him nice things. I say nice things, and he's just not doing it. So that reinforcement thing doesn't work, right? We've all heard that to a certain extent. So the technical side of this is, remember, reinforcement is the outcome, right? It doesn't matter what the consequence looks like. It's the effect of behavior. So for them to say they're doing something, they're not using reinforcement. They're not using a reinforcer at all. So understanding that, because that's something you hear a lot in school, that reinforcement thing doesn't work. They just shut down and they don't do it. And it's, what the heck is it? No, you use consequences. It doesn't make the behavior happen more often. It wasn't reinforcement to begin with.
Yeah. I'm glad you started off with that story. Reinforcement is so foundational to behavior analysis. And I remember as a grad student, so this is going way back to the 90s, and there was this article, and I'm going to probably butcher the name, but it was something like, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, and ... And the whole article was this person, I think he was in physical education, was talking about how physical educators were trying to apply reinforcement. They were giving kids M&Ms, they were giving kids sweets. And just like you said, just because you're giving something to someone that someone likes, the thought that, oh, that is all. No, you have to keep talking about the functional effect, which if it's reinforcement, it's always going to be an increase in the future probability of behavior. That's it.
Yep.
I mean,
A
if it's not
scream at
increasing, you
someone
don't have
could be
reinforcement.
reinforcement. Right. Screaming at someone could be reinforcement. Now, I'm not saying we program that. The idea is it's an effect. The behavior increases, gets louder, happens more often. That's when reinforcement is in effect. But you hear so many people say, I'm not going to give reinforcement because it doesn't work. These kids just still sit there. Well, of course, let's be honest. If a child can't read and you're going to give them a little pat on the back and say, keep on reading, buddy, and they don't read, well, that obviously wasn't effective enough to get it going, but we're going to do a whole different thing of the value of that consequence. But the idea is you can't call it reinforcement if the behavior isn't happening more. You can say consequence that was not functioning as a reinforcer. I like that.
Yeah.
You thought it was a reinforcer, but it wasn't.
There's a whole technical debate too, which I don't want to get into here, but some people will talk about when you're translating behavior analysis, is it okay to just talk to people and use the word reward? And again, it's a can of worms when you're working with people, because reward is not a technical term.
No.
And one of the issues that comes up with when you start using other words for our technical terms is there's great confusion. You may remember the work from DC and Ryan, and those were the folks that slammed reinforcement and had all this social psychology work where they're like, oh, people don't, if you give someone $1, that cheapens their experience, and they don't want to work for rewards. And that, our old buddy, punished by rewards, Alfie Kohn. There's these people that don't understand the technical difference between reinforcement and rewards. But then again, if you're working with the parent and you're like, oh, well, it's a reward. So I don't want to open up that can of worms, even though I guess I kind of am opening it up. It is important that we remain strict to what these things do. And I guess how you communicate to people is another thing.
Yeah, I think what I had said earlier comes into play. You need to be technically correct and convey that message in lay terms, right? We're not talking about how to talk to a practitioner. What we're dealing with here is the misconceptions that maybe you have had at a certain time or you've been approached to, how to respond to them. So you want to make sure you're technical, and how you share that, you want to make sure that you're sharing it the most effective way. I don't suggest you use the term reward, but you can talk about the effects of reinforcement, because this leads to the second story for me. And that is anything that has a negative in front of it is obviously the opposite of reinforcement, right? So I've heard how many times, well, thankfully, we don't use negative reinforcement in our classroom. We don't yell at kids or anything. And I sit there and, you may have had class, this student may have had class once, twice, they've seen it one time. So you understand, obviously I've not had enough stimulus control, so I've got to keep going. But to hear that, it just irks me to understand, understanding negative reinforcement is not bad. It's still reinforcement. Remember, and again, we're not telling a lot of people on here exactly what it is, just understand that people don't understand. And there's misconceptions, are all over the internet, all over the world, especially in classrooms, the schools, parents too. Positive is nice, negative is bad.
Yeah. It's a good story. Probably everyone listening to this podcast can relate to what you just said. Negative reinforcement is just a hell of a hard concept to understand. But as we just said, reinforcement deals with the future increase, the probability of behavior. So you have an increase in behavior. Yes, so the negative part means that you're removing something. You're removing this aversive stimulus, and the technical term just makes it sound like it's punishing. So you're absolutely right. But wow, you have to understand negative reinforcement and punishment. They're foundational concepts to behavior analysis.
And the funny thing is everybody who's gone through an ABA one or basic ABA has seen the matrix, right?
Right.
Consequence applied, the four squares.
Yep.
Understanding that is way more difficult than the professor that's teaching you wants to lead on, because the entire world approaches that with their misconceptions and misunderstandings. It's a hard behavior analysis, take it for granted. We pick that up and we just go. And understanding that very few people actually understand, because we don't use it that way in the world. I mean, this actually, we got to come to our first word here.
Okay.
And the first word is first.
Oh, okay. The first word is first.
The first word is first.
I love it.
So this leads us into the second part. And this is where I think you can really understanding that, like special educators, behavior analysts, we take data, right? We take lots of time series data of behavior.
Yep.
Can you illustrate some of the misconceptions of these terms using the data? Because I've had that where they explain to me something and the data is saying the exact opposite, or what that data is showing is actually showing another aspect of behavior analysis, so foundational. So let you hit this one first.
Well, I can think of times where this is maybe early on when I was a behavior analyst. Like I cut my teeth in the 90s being, I did two things. I was a behavior analyst. I was also a special education teacher. And I remember very early on, like my very first job was being a behavior analyst, and we would collect data. We were at a system that was using token economies, and token economies can be used to both increase behavior, or if you're using them when you're taking points away or tokens away, or however we were using points at the time, where you're punishing behavior. And the idea is that the behavior would be going down. And very clearly, we had someone who, like people, this is another unfortunate thing when people start learning about the behavior analysis and they gravitate towards punishment. So there would be some staff that would just try to punish and punish and punish. And, the data were not going down. The data were flat, kind of going up a little bit. And people were like, well, I'm punishing the behavior. I keep taking away these points, but it's not working the way we think it should be. And as a result, what you learn is you just don't have a punishment contingency there, because if you did, the data would be going down. And even though you can say you're doing things, even though you have this token economy in place, there's all kinds of reasons why it might not be working. And that's exactly, whenever I think about your question about it showing up in the data, that just speaks to me, and it reminds me of how you have to look at the data, and it's all a functional effect.
Yeah, you can't call it things. If you punish something, if it's effective, behavior goes away.
That's right.
It doesn't hang out at all.
No.
So there could be a variety of things going on. Either it's ineffective as a consequence, you've missed a function, there's many different raises different questions, but it's not this turn on, turn off situation where if the behavior's flatlined and kind of decreasing, that's not reinforcing, right? It's going away. If it's punishing, boom, it should be gone. So, another interesting one, we talk about prompting, and we didn't talk about it here, but that's a one that's come up for me a lot, where you're giving some help. Like that's not giving help. Kids can become prompt dependent. They can't do it without the prompt because that's become part of the 4-term contingency, et cetera. So it's now as security antecedent. So if you look at the data and you're like, oh, I do this whole thing, but when I take away the sign, the behavior goes away. I don't know what's going on. The kids just not learning. They are learning. They just have to have the prompt for you to do anything. So this behavior is not come under these controls understanding that it's not that they don't know how to do the behavior. It's understanding that antecedent that you thought was quote unquote helping them has come to function as a necessary antecedent, and it's come under really firm stimulus control to that. And that's not what we want there. A prompt is nothing. It's something to act as a mediary because we want it to come under some other control. So, looking at the data, when they take that away and we're like, we send them over to Spanish class without the prompt that we didn't realize became necessary, but that can show up in the data very quickly, either in a change of condition where you change your setting. And so that's some misunderstanding that, hey, I'm just trying to help them out, when in essence, you haven't done anything but make it so that they can't do it without it.
I think, and I've said this many times when it comes to prompting, we so overuse it in our field, and there are so many better ways to teach. And this doesn't mean, my opinion isn't never use prompts. The prompts should be way over here and we shouldn't rely on them. Like there are times when they're really helpful, but just so many people, the very first thing they think about doing when they're teaching is, well, I'm going to help them out, like you said, and we're going to use these prompt strategies. And I remember one of the first chicken camps that you and I went to was with Terry Ryan, if you remember.
Yeah.
Terry Ryan, a very famous animal trainer. And, Doug and I, just full disclosure, we believe in becoming as good as behavior analysts as we can. So, we attend these chicken camps so that we can become better trainers and understand when an animal trainer, how do these principles work? Anyway, that's an aside. Terry said, when she was talking about when you work with animals and you chickens and you prompt the chickens, and she gave this great analogy that just stuck with me. She said, imagine if you had to drive to my house, and what I'm going to do is you're going to focus on, when you're following me in your car, just watching my turn signals. If I turn right, I turn left, and versus shaping. Whereas if you were driving to my house and, you took the wrong turn, and then, you took another turn, in the lesson is, if you teach someone up by the prompting, you're never going to learn how to get to their house, because you're only going to always be following those turn signals. Whereas the world will shape you up. And, if you go the wrong way, I've got to go the other way. And then you figure out how to get to that. And so much of our behavior is shaped, and there's ways that we can shape behavior. And again, I think I'm going down this other path, but you just made me think about, prompting, and we want to give help. We're in behavior analysis because we want to help people out. But yet, if we over help them, so to speak, and over prompt them, then it's going to be really challenging to fade that. And oftentimes, these prompts might never be faded.
But that shows up in the data, right? When you turn things off, the behavior will disappear. And you don't want to misunderstand that, oh, I did a horrible job teaching. This child can't do this in this setting. It actually has more to do with this prompt presence and absence than it does with that individual's ability to do the behavior. So it's changing that. And as an aside, a little humorous anecdote, I thought Rick was going in another direction with chicken camp. He's already smiling. So I'll give you a quick story. We're at the chicken camp, and, I did a good job. He wasn't my partner. I was with somebody else. We were doing a great job. Chicken was doing a lot of great things. And so it was my turn to display my chicken in front of everybody, right? So I went to go get my chicken. I dropped it on the table, and I had all the little things out to touch red, touch whatever. I had the dipper ready. Chicken goes flying across the room. I'm like, what in the world? I mean, this is not, everything's going great. Turns out Rick took my chicken that I've been working with, replaced it with an experimentally naive one who had no history. And so with him, and he just laughing up a storm. But that was funny. But that's a case of when I have chicken that had no training whatsoever. So we just have a humorous anecdote about that. But I'm getting back to the idea of the data what it tells you. You need to understand what's going on and then properly align what's happening to the technical definitions, the technical effects. So if behavior is disappearing, there must be something there that is functioning as a punishment, or it's on extinction, right? It's now the consequence of being withheld, depending on what your intervention is. But you need to let the data tell you what's going on and then look at it as an explanation in that technical sense.
Yeah. One of the morals of this story, at least in this section and for all behavior analysis, is you have to look at the data and see this is behavior so idiosyncratic. Like you gave the example earlier about yelling at somebody, but yet the behavior increases. It seems like, if I got yelled at by someone, I'd be like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? My heart would start racing, and I definitely want to not do that behavior, so it could have a punishing effect. But that doesn't mean just because I feel that way and we think other people should respond that way. Always look at the data, functions of behavior. If that's something that we believe in, then we have to understand that the function of the behavior, when you see it, this is telling you this person's responding in this particular way to whatever environmental stimuli and conditions you've arranged.
You want to get away from the pop definitions, and you want to get away from the preconceived. So when you go into a situation and say to yourself, I'm going to reinforce this, right? You can go in with the idea, I'm going to attempt to reinforce it, but the data can say something totally different.
Exactly.
I'm trying to so you don't want to you don't want to get away from the pop definitions, reinforcement's good, punishment's bad, etc. And you want to go away from the perceived thing. So I wrote this plan, I want to make it reinforcing, and oh, look, it's going away. It's not well, we don't, let the data help you and then understand the context of that data.
Yeah, which is why I always say, don't go and use ABC, antecedent behavior consequence. Use ABP, antecedent behavior postcedent, because until you know something's a consequence, if you're responding like just because you see something and you write, oh, here's the antecedent, here's the behavior, here's you don't know that it's a real consequence. Just call it a postcedent. Okay, I'm ranting a lot here. Let me come up with the second word today. The second secret word is financial. Financial. All right. Well, we're moving right along, Doug, and we are already at our third section. And what I want to do is I want to do a little lightning round here with you.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I'm going to give you a term, and I'm going to say how it could be, misunderstood or misapplied. And I want you to tell me in a few sentences why this is being misused. Are you ready for the lightning round?
I guess I am.
Okay. Motivation.
Motivation.
And people say, oh, those kids just aren't trying enough. What's
the
misunderstanding here?
So again, we're coming back to the technical definitions within behavior analysis, but it's combating the greater kind of definition of motivation. Why? What's going on? What are we doing? When we think about motivation, we're thinking about something that's measurable across some specific dimension. So if I want to eat something, right? Oh, I'm really, really hungry. Well, we can measure that by the amount of time, right, since the last time we ate, and establishing operation. I'm not going to go into all the definitions, but the idea is it's amount of time and also the availability of food. And then I'm going to do seeking behaviors. What people are trying to say is when they're not doing something, they're just not motivated, which excludes all the consequences that are available, excludes the current skill level of the individual. Think about this. Here's a fun book called War and Peace. You're reading at a kindergarten level. Oh, they're just not motivated to read. They can't read, right? They can't read. That's not valuable, right? There's not a situation where a consequence is applied to that. So looking at this motivation puts it on the child. Behavior analytically, we're looking at it. How can we change the value of these consequences under these certain conditions? That's behaviorally thinking about motivation, but it's not uncommon to get sucked into that other side of things. You have to pull yourself back in, think about, all right, what can I change around here to change the value of these reinforcers under these conditions?
Okay.
Did I do all right?
Ding. You
Okay,
got a
good.
point.
Got 1 point. That was
Okay.
more than a few sentences, so I got a little
Yeah,
nervous.
well,
I thought I'd make it.
that was the slower lightning round there.
That was the thunder round.
Yeah. Okay. Task analysis. I broke these behaviors up into steps.
Well, task analysis has so much more than just that. That is part of it, but you can break a behavior up into steps and still not do it at a certain level. I don't want to say I'm joking about this, but I use the example. There's a certain number of steps to crossing a street, and I can do them at 100%, but I'm getting run over. It takes me an hour to get across the street. So task analysis involves more than just breaking things into steps, which is a common, you have to understand mastery. How do I get it to completion? How do I link them together? We got to chain this up. There is so much more to task analysis than just simply do 7 steps.
Oh. Another point. You're doing very well.
All right.
Let me give you another one.
Okay.
Fluency. I was working with a student and they were writing really fast, but it doesn't seem that they are fluent.
Okay. So there's 2 things here. Fluency is an outcome, right? Fluency is you can display high frequency, as you just mentioned, but just doing something fast isn't fluent. You have to be able to do something quickly. I'm using the term quickly instead of fast, because fast, but also accurately. And we see fluent performance a lot, right? We expect fluent performance sort of in our actors, our news people in sports. We expect fluent performance, and you can see them. People who can't make X number of shots quickly running down the street, dribbling, can't play professional basketball. So understanding that the behavior, just because it's fast, that doesn't approach what that understanding of fluency is.
I'm going to give you a point, and because you've done so good, I'm going to give you a bonus question here.
A hidden question. I love a hidden question. Let's go.
Here's a lightning round. Okay.
Okay.
Generalization.
Generalization.
I have a student and they can do this skill in different places. It's generalized.
Okay. So if you've been a behavior analyst at all, and you've heard the term generalization, understanding that generalization has a multi-part rather than simply just taking skills, right? Being able to do it in different settings. There are 2 other types, and they're also within the levels of learning, moving on towards other aspects of learning. But you also need to display that skill as parts of the intervention are removed, right? It's called maintenance. Now, what's interesting was we used that prompt example before. If that behavior goes away when the prompt's not there, guess what? They didn't display maintenance. So that's a good trigger to say, hey, you know what? They became a little prompt dependent. Let's fix that. So that's one aspect, increasing generalization. And then you've got the other aspect of being able to do things that are functionally equivalent, but maybe don't share the same physical movement. So being able to say hello a variety of different ways to someone. So the teacher, right? If I just continue to say hi, 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 that's not going to necessarily get picked up by the environment. But if I could say, hi, hello, how you doing? I'm also displaying generalization, response generalization. So you have this kind of umbrella of aspects that are generalization. It's not just simply, oh, look, he took the skill to Spanish class. I don't know why I'm picking Spanish today, but we're going to Spanish class.
Doug, 4 points. You have owned the lightning round here. I couldn't fool this professor who's been doing behavior analysis for many years.
Yeah.
Thought I might get you on one of them, but nope. You said them all. And
I try my best.
Thinking about your responses just makes me so appreciate, and we've just covered some common ones. I don't know that there's anything that we said today that was a revelation for our audience members. These are things that people understand all the time, but just the depth and breadth of all of the terms. And it's not like we're static. The things, if you're a BCBA, the things you learn to pass that test and just even beyond that, keep growing. And there's always new terms out there. And it's because our science is a living, breathing entity. And it's not like, oh, we discovered all this stuff back in the 40s and 50s, and there's been nothing new. And these terms are going to continue to evolve, and people are going to continue to debate the efficacy of these. And when you were talking about generalization, there is a lot that goes into just understanding when you say generalization, what do people mean? And same thing with fluency, which you can find some of these terms. That's not necessarily a behavior analytic term, but you're starting to see it show up in more books, and people are explaining it behaviorally. So there are being technically accurate and applying that just is going to help make you a better behavior analyst. And if you happen to be in a position of supervising people, then you're paying it forward and you're helping raise the technical adequacy of our field.
And our clients we work with, and their parents, their caregivers, their guardians, their staff that are working at facilities. It helps to bring that communication more in line to help the individuals that you work with.
Yeah. And it's nice to be technically adequate, but Doug and I are in our ivory towers and we're concerned with the outcomes. And anybody who is in the field of behavior analysis is equally concerned with the outcomes. And to have better outcomes, as you point out, you got to apply the science in the technical term. Otherwise, things might be going awry. You're like, oh, why isn't that happening? Well, it could be because there's a misapplication of the term.
Well, that brings us to our third word. And our third word is bang.
All right. Bang. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. This was a very fun discussion about all the ways that, some of the ways that people we could probably do a part 2, 3, and 4 with misapplications, because it is a science and there's a lot to it.
Definitely.
Well, with that, let me thank you all today for joining Doug and I on ABA On Call. Thank you for being part of ABA On Call. Want to grab your CEU? Just click the link in the instructions, complete the quiz, enter the secret words, and pay the fee to download your certificate. You've done the work, claim the credit. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.